Welcome back, everybody, for Train Tuesday. I'm your host, Jim Wiggin, and we're going to talk Genesis today. We're going to talk about some Genesis releases that we're talking about for the month of December. I hope your month of December is going well so far. We've got to talk about some Cabooses today, and we're going to talk about some flat cars. Before we get into it, though, let's see who's joining us today out there. We have Chris, Harold, Anthony, Shannon, Ronald. We have George Emmett. We have Ted. And I think I need to fly to Pennsylvania. It looks like Derek is all set with a pizza and some cold beverages over there. So that's good. My local hobby shop's here too. Ian and Matt, John, Terry, John. So, hey, this is great. We got a full house. I'm hoping coming up in the 2022 year, when we start doing this show later, I hope more of you can join us live. That's always more fun when we get to see each other. And until we get back to shows, this is as close as it's going to get. But don't worry, we're going to be talking about some shows here in this program. We're also going to talk about a couple of reviews that just hit YouTube. And we're going to talk about these great Genesis releases. So I hope you guys are ready. Let's do one more round of shout outs. We've got Ricky, Eric, Mark, Ashley from PA, Eugene, Aiden, Stephen, Mark, and that looks like I've got everybody. No, I forgot Jay Cura. There's Jay. All right. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for stopping by. Now that we're all here and we're ready to get started, let's do what we always do. Let's assume the comfortable position. Let's put down the hobby knife, grab the beverage of your choice, sit back and enjoy Train Tuesday. Here we go. So like I said, we're talking Genesis today. We're talking about the Genesis ICC bay window cabooses. These are SP specific, and a little bit of history about these. Now, these, of course, were made by the International Car Company, and this is one of the last vestiges of the caboose. A lot of these were produced in the 70s into the early 1980s. And of course, by the middle of the 1980s, they were slowly being replaced by an end of train unit. You don't see them as much anymore. However, you will see these on industrial leads, sometimes smaller branch lines, anywhere where a train has to make a crossing. Sometimes it's not protected and it's a long train. I mean, these modern freight cars are getting bigger and bigger. So they call these shoving platforms. And these shoving platforms allow the train crew to safely traverse long stretches through the industrial rails and such. And some of those cabooses actually have an air horn for added safety. And so what's really cool about these Genesis cabooses is they have decoders in them. You can adjust the lighting, you can turn the lighting on and off, and if you get the Tsunami 2 versions, they actually come with sound. So if you're into prototype operations, this is the perfect caboose for you because it really adds another dimension to your prototype operations, especially if you're following all the rules of your specific railroad. So starting out, we've got this really lovely Southern Pacific caboose here. These were the 4600 series, and a couple of things that's kind of unique about them. They basically move their red marker lights towards the end of the car, and these are common with the cars that you would have seen on the line in the 1980s. This is some of the last cabooses that Southern Pacific had. Now, this has the later style generator on the trucks, and this one does have the air whistle if you get the Tsunami 2 version. Now, staying with the Southern Pacific, let's see. We've got another Southern Pacific here to show you. Here's the police version. So this is pretty neat. Go forward a few years, in 1990s, and the Southern Pacific, like a lot of railroads, was seeing a lot more theft than they used to. And so Southern Pacific had the idea of making basically police stations on the rails. And this is a representation of that. These really did exist. You can find them in pictures and books. And it was basically a way to stop the theft, or at least curb it. And they even did this to one of their freight cars. They converted one of their freight cars, passenger cars, into a mobile command station. So we're offering this as well. If you're modeling the SP in the 1990s, this is a great addition. We're offering this in 2 different road numbers. And it's still a Southern Pacific C50-9 class caboose. Functioning marker lights in DCC. There are spotlights on this one, but they are not operational. They're just there for to maintain the authenticity. There's also a roof-mounted RV with RV-style air conditioner, which is kind of cool. And this one too also has the air whistles. Now we've got a lot of good SP goodness today. I got one last one, and we got some comments on this. This posted to our social media account, I believe, last night. And we had a lot of comments on it. People wondering, is this real? And yes, it did exist. It really did exist. Now, I'm sure most of you know the origins of the Kodachrome with the failed merger of the Santa Fe and the SP. Both railroads adopted a paint scheme very similar to what you see here, and they applied the paint scheme to their locomotives. One would leave out the SF, one would leave out the SP. You could probably figure out who. And the plan was that once the merger went through, the only thing they had to do was to apply 2 letters to their paint scheme, and they were done. So it was great planning on their part. Unfortunately or fortunately, depending on which side of the aisle you stand, it never happened. But that didn't mean that equipment did not get painted in this catching Kodachrome paint scheme. And this caboose here, the one that we're offering this month, number 4726, was the one and only bay window caboose to get this paint scheme. And yes, it did exist. Again, this was repainted in the mid-1980s, right at the height of this proposed merger. And the common paint scheme that was adopted for the locomotives, the freight cars, the cabooses, a lot of people really liked them, and they got the name Kodachrome because the red and the yellow look like the famous slide film made by Kodak. So this is the only one in this paint scheme. And if you're modeling that time and you want something a little bit different than your standard Southern Pacific caboose, this would be a great one to pick up. This one, of course, if you get the Tsunami 2, does have the whistling function with it, as well as all the marker lights. So coming up next is one that we had some fans here when we announced them about a couple of weeks ago now. And this is a really cool little road. This is obviously based on an SP caboose. I'm going to try to say it without butchering it. If you're out there, please forgive me. Willamette and Pacific, how's that? I could call it the WP, but that's gonna ruin it for the next picture I'm about to show you. But this one is a really neat caboose, and we decided to do it because it is based on not only an SP caboose, but the line that this little short line took over was based on older Southern Pacific routes. It was formed in 1993, and the railroad, like I said, took over several of the Southern Pacific routes. It's pretty much branch lines up in Oregon. And while a lot of railroads, by the 93 had all but eliminated the caboose, the Willamette and Pacific decided to keep a caboose as another means of safety and shoving platform or what have you. So we're decided to offer this one. We got some research on it. The developers found it, and definitely pretty cool. And let's see if I can zoom in on this a little bit to show you the artwork. Pretty cool. I mean, you can kind of see the map there. on the side of the caboose. Jake here is saying Willamette. Well, everybody's saying Willamette. That's what I said. I said Willamette. Okay. Again, you can take the New Englander out of New England, but you can't take the New Englander out of New England. I don't know, something like that. Yeah, and somebody was asking too about the SP. Yes, they did have their own police force. In fact, a lot of Class 1s do have their own police force, just because there is so much property that the railroads have to not just maintain, but to watch for theft or vandalism, things of that nature. So like BNSF, they have their own police force. So it's real common. And like I said, look it up. If you're not familiar with this, do a search. There's plenty of great books out there too by that feature the Southern Pacific cabooses, and they're, fortunately for us, by the 1990s, there was a lot of people rail fanning and getting pictures of them. So let's see. Do I have anything else in here? I believe I do. I'm going to zoom out of here. So remember I said I couldn't say W&P because we've got the Western Pacific. In fact, this is the last order of cabooses of the Western Pacific. These were ordered by them in 1980. And this one that we're doing, we're actually doing two road numbers, but this particular one here, 482, if you go to our website and go to the new announcements, on the ends you'll see WP spelled out, just the WP, and that's kind of unique to this caboose. That was one of the only ones I did it too. And these all came from ICC in 1980. This was probably one of the last orders of caboose for this railroad. And last but not least, and I think you guys probably knew this was coming. We've done a lot of SP stuff. So check this out. So yeah, it's SP, but it's armor yellow. What's going on here? You can leave it to our developers. I mean, you got to remember, our developers are mainly modelers too. So when they get into a project, they dive deep and they look in books and slides and photography. And some of these projects that you're seeing today, they've been working on for a long, long time, months, sometimes years in advance. So they find some really neat stuff when they start digging. And this is one of them. So this particular caboose, this is 2019 plus. This is modern, which is really cool. And so remember what I was saying earlier, if you do prototype operations, even if you just have a shelf style switching layout and you don't have an area to run around, you don't have a siding to perform a run around, it's perfectly fine to use this shoving platform and back the train backwards and then leave the area locomotive first. And it's pretty common. In fact, I think I've mentioned it before. Here in Champaign, on portions of the old ICG and the old Illinois terminal, Canadian National has a small train that comes not too far from here, actually, and switches out a plastic facility. They get a lot of plastic pellets for the making of cups and things of that nature. And there's really no runaround between the yard and to this end of town. It's on the westernmost part of town. So quite often, sometimes when I'm on my way to the studio even, I'll see a former Illinois Central caboose used as a shoving platform as he's easing his way across Route 10. And it's a neat thing to do if you're into prototype operations, especially with some of the guys out there that are doing the switching layouts that don't have a lot of room. Here's a way you can justify not having a siding on your layout. You can bring the train in caboose first. And so really neat. This is a modern caboose though, for all intents and purposes. It is, this is based on a paint scheme that UP had in 2019, still being used. but they don't call it a caboose anymore. It's a shoving platform. So I don't have one exactly like this in the studio. I'm going to go ahead and minimize my screen. But I do have one of the ICC cabooses from a previous release a couple of years ago. Now, keep in mind, this is based on the Baltimore and Ohio prototype, so the details are going to be different, but the general layout of the model is going to be the same. It's still based on an ICC bay window caboose. And here we have it right here. Now, if you're not familiar with these Genesis cabooses, they are just absolutely phenomenal. Now, because it is Genesis, not only is it going to be specific to that railroad, but it's going to be specific to that number, just like the Genesis locomotives. So if you're not familiar with these, let me let you in on what kind of features you have with these, okay? These are just packed. LED lighting, all the way around. For the non-sound, they come equipped with a decoder by NCE, and it will work in both DCC or DC, it doesn't matter. There's various lighting functions depending on the caboose, but that's all available through the decoder. Depending on the car that you choose, there's different classes. They'll feature either a single or a dual roof markers, rear end mounted marker lights, and these are all based on the prototype or the era. And then the interior, they have LED lights in the interior, and all of the functions are available to you with the DCC decoder. And again, that's an NCE decoder. NCE, of course, has been around for quite a long time in the DCC world. Now, if you go ahead and go with the Tsunami 2 upgrade, now you've got sound. So you're probably wondering, what kind of sound do you have? Well, we talked about the air horn, which, again, if you're doing prototype operations, you're doing a shoving platform, the air horn comes in really handy. But you get the clickety-clack. If you want to simulate the jointed rail, you can have that option on. You'll even have a flat spot sound. So if you've ever been rail fanning, you've heard that. A flat spot on a train going by is quite loud. Well, we've simulated that here too. Brake set, release sounds. This is great for operations. If you're doing prototype operations, you're going to want to set your brakes. You're going to want to release your brakes. This just makes the operating scene so much more interesting. There's even an emergency brake application, the big hole as they call it. It basically dumps the air. Handbrake tie-down release. You'll even hear the flange squeal, which is great if you're doing industrial. You know how tight those radiuses can be. And it's adjustable. You can adjust the flange squeal. So you get everything that we talked about as far as LED lighting with the non-sound ones, and then when you upgrade to the Tsunami 2, you get all those lighting features as well. So, it's pretty cool. And if you were looking at that while I was talking about some of the features, it wasn't that long ago that a caboose like that was brass. And this isn't brass. It's all injection molded plastic with metal and plastic detail parts. And it's, looking at it here in the studio, it just looks absolutely amazing. And again, it wasn't that long ago, something like this would have to have been produced in brass. It wasn't possible until a few years ago. So that's all I've got for the Genesis cabooses. I'm going to see what kind of questions you guys might have, because like I said, when I'm running the screens, I sometimes miss stuff. So I'm going to go back a little bit, and Steven's got a comment. Okay, well noted. Don't forget, Steven and everybody else, if you have a comment like that, if there's something you'd like to see, go to our website, go to the product suggestion email and put that in. Now, one thing I tell you guys all the time, and I want you to remember this, just because you don't get a response doesn't mean we're not actively listening. We are listening. We're filing those and using them for future releases. In fact, the last few releases that we've done have all been based on your input. So we are listening. Let's see. So Wayne is having a conversation out there with Matt. He's seeing that there's lacking antenna and marker lights on this particular model. So if you're talking about the one that I showed in the studio, this guy here, that is because it's based on the Baltimore and Ohio. The SP, and they've going back to, let me share that picture. Not that one, but let's see. I think some of the earlier one. There we go. So you see how the Kodachrome, what they're referring to is this antenna right here. It's a spotting feature on SP. It's very common on the SP. And you can't quite make it out on the police one because of the white background. You can definitely see it here on this one. So don't worry, the SP versions will have the appropriate antennas. And again, it's all based on the actual Caboose number. All the research is done that way. So with Genesis, it's not only is it accurate to the railroad, but it's accurate to the actual number of the Caboose. All right, let's see if there's any other questions here. Scott Olson's got a cool input up in Neenah, Wisconsin. I know where that is. They have a shoving platform on the Canadian National. It is XAC. That's cool. Very cool. So yeah, even if you've got just a small little switching layout, you can definitely add one of these. And if you're one of those guys that, uses all the sounds that the Tsunami 2 has, maybe you've gone out and bought a proto throttle and you're using everything to scale, because let's admit, there's a lot of guys out there, myself included, that enjoy that level of prototype operations. This adds a whole new level to that as well. And yeah, like I said, the modern short lines and modern class 1s still use them. Let's see what else we've got for questions on the Caboose before we move on. Glenn says, you're making some great stuff nowadays. I need to find one of your new Genesis CNW-9s. Glenn, thank you for that. We appreciate that. Yeah, the -9s, they sold out quickly. And there's a few of the online retailers that you can check. If you don't have a local hobby shop near you that can procure any more of those, I can tell you that our distribution center here is clean out. All -9s are gone. So do some calling around. The CNW ones were very popular. And the other thing too is, remember, pre-orders, anything like that. And I know with a new locomotive like that, it may be a little bit different to pre-order something a year in advance without seeing it. Now that they're getting out there, people are really seeing all the hard work that development and the factory has put into these models. All right, let's go on to our next product, and that is the F89-F Flat Cars that we're doing. So what I've got here, let's see. What I've got here is we're doing a little bit of everything. We're doing the 1960s, we're doing the 1970s, and we're going all the way up to the 90s. Which is really cool. People don't realize Trailer Train itself, what TTX used to be named, Trailer Train got its start in 1956, believe it or not. Now, the F89F was not out in 1956, but the formation of the company, Trailer Train, or what we know as TTX Corporation now, they were formed in 1956. They were one of the early adopters of trailer on flat car. Even as late or as early as the 1950s, we started to slowly see the demise of the boxcar. We were starting to see more inroads made by the Interstate Commerce Committee, trucking, and something else happened in the 1950s. I'm going to ask this question out there for our truckers out there, because I know the truckers are going to know this answer. What's something else that happened in the trailer side of things on the trucking industry in the 1950s? We're talking late 1950s, early 1960s. Something else happened, and it's the reason why we have the 89-foot flat cars. I'm going to watch the comments here, but there's something important about the trailers. So if somebody knows, give me an answer. And I see, there we go. I think Terry's got it. Yes, you are absolutely correct. 40-foot trailers. Believe it or not, before this era, trailers were only about 30, 35, 25, depending on what they were. And you don't see them as much anymore. But at one time, a lot of these companies that built the flat cars, they had a 70-foot flat car for these trailers. Well, as soon as the 40-foot trailers came about, they could no longer get two trailers on a 70-foot, hence the 89F came out. And Trailer Train was one of the early adopters of the 89F. And as you can see at the top one, 1960s. Believe it or not, Trailer Train was originally an oxide red brown color, and that was their logo, Trailer Train spelled out. So if you're modeling the 1960s into the early 1970s, this is the perfect car for you. Look at the 1970s. So in 1970, Trailer Train changed their corporate colors to that mustard yellow color. That happened right in 1970. And it stayed that way for a very long time. So if you're modeling the 1970s into the 80s, these are perfectly appropriate. You wouldn't see them any earlier than 1970. And then in the 1990s, we had something else happen. They changed their name. They just simply called themselves TTX and then finally TTX Corporation. And while the color has stayed the same, their logo has changed. Now you can see the 1990s logo. In fact, if you guys are having a hard time seeing that, I'll zoom in on that so you can see. Here's the original logo, Trailer Train, 1960s. By the 1970s, they just had this stylized TT. Still spelling out Trailer Train, but they had gone with that new corporate yellow color. And then finally, coming into the 90s, they went to this TTX. Now, of course, they've changed their logo once again. But if you're modeling the 90s, and we had a lot of requests for the 90s, these are perfectly suited for your layout. Now, we didn't stop there. Now, one thing I do want to say, too, is all the 89F flat cars that we are showing, they're available. The 60s and the 70s model is available in 4 different road numbers. The second 70s version and the 1990s version is available in 3 different road numbers, but still real easy to make up a nice little unit train. So back to this, we're offering different flat cars with different trailers, and we've got the 40-foot trailers here. Of course, we've got the Railco or Realco, and you see this is the original Trailer Train paint scheme. Now, the car itself is good for the 1960s, but if you look at the trailer real carefully, you'll notice ACI label. So you can do late 60s into the 70s with this car if you like. Nothing says 1970s, early 1970s more than Penn Central, and here you go. Again, a Trailer Train with a 1960s paint scheme. You've got a 1970s era 40-foot trailer, complete with ACI panel, and these lasted. A lot of these lasted well into the Conrail era. So if you're doing early Conrail, you could definitely justify a couple of these. And going into the mid to later 70s, we've got the Rock Island with their new blue scheme and their new stylized R. Rail fans jokingly, of course, called it bankruptcy blue. And unfortunately, after 1980, the rock as we know it ceased to exist. But if you're modeling the 1970s, this is perfect for you. And then last but not least, again, 1970s car, 1970s 40-foot Mopac. Get a lot of requests for Mopac, so you're going to see some Mopac offerings here and there. So you Midwest modelers, you've got quite a bit to choose from. Specifically, you 1970s. And, you could justify this and also the Rock Island into the 1980s. Those Rock Island trailers, they didn't get repainted overnight. So they went on to find life with other shippers. Now, Tom brings up a great point, and I'm gonna display this. We do this in the artwork for a different reason, but for you prototype guys out here, he's absolutely right. Trailers should be on the front for stability. I mean, that's right. If you go rail fanning and you see these, and there's only one per car, they're always going to be on the front. The reason why we have them on the back like this, it's just something that the artist has done. It's an artist file thing. I'm not sure why, or it just presents better. But yeah, if you're running these, you definitely want to have, if you don't have two trailers, you want one on the front. Terry reminds us too, the Mopac's seen well into the 80s. Oh yeah, especially this kind. The Rock Island looks sharp. That when they when they came out with that new blue paint scheme, I know a lot of the older modelers did not like that, but I kind of like that scheme. We can, and if you go to our product suggestion email and give us that, and we get folks like you that have the same desire, we will probably do that. All right. So a few things to share with you. We've got some neat stuff coming up here in the next few months, actually, and I wanted to talk to you guys about that. First of all, we're getting back into show season. And our first show of the 2022 year is going to be Amherst out in West Springfield, Massachusetts, or West Springfield's MA. And that's my old stomping grounds. In fact, that is probably one of the first train shows I ever went to. So it's a huge show. If you've never been there before, you owe it to yourself to go. I'm going to share my screen. I want to show you a little bit about their website, because they're actually going to have a live tomorrow night. So if you're on the fence about going, check them out tomorrow night. They're going to have a live feed. Let's see. Here we go. John Saradotti, who is the show organizer, he's been talking the show up. Now, last year, of course, it wasn't on because of the pandemic, but it is back on now. And if you go to this website, just do a real easy search with your preferred internet browser and search for Amherst Society Railroad Hobby Show, Model Railroad Hobby Show. And like I said, tomorrow night, I believe the details here, 6 o'clock, and that's Eastern time. They're going to do a live feed. It's going to be a couple hours long from what I've been told. And they're going to be talking about everything that's at the show. It's a great show. It's 4 buildings. I dare say it's almost the Disney of model railroad shows. I mean, it's just huge. And you can definitely spend a weekend there. There's some great stuff to see. There's a little bit of everything from Z-scale all the way to, I think it's the 1.5 gauge. Just everything you can think of. In fact, one year I went, they actually had a narrow gauge steam locomotive on display. So definitely check that out if you get a chance, and get all the details. It's coming right up. It's the end of January, January 29th and 30th. And and I'm going to be there, as well as some other friends from Athearn that you may recognize, and we're looking forward to it. And anytime I can get back to the East Coast is always a good time, and really want to see what you guys are up to. So you guys on the East Coast that are going to be at that show, stop by our booth and show us what you're working on. So I told you at the beginning of the show, I had some reviews to share with you. We've had some guys that have been extremely busy. We've got another review from Ben over at BA Rail Systems. Now, for you guys that are into Canadian prototype stuff and you've not seen Ben's channel before, you owe it to yourself to go check out his channel. Let me go ahead and go to his video. And let's get that fired up for you. And we'll blow it up for you so you can see. So Ben had the opportunity to review the Canadian National version. And if you don't know, Ben is modeling, I believe it's the British Columbia area. And his layout is just coming along really nicely. So again, if you're into Canadian modeling, you owe it to yourself to see his channel. It's BA Rail System. And we'll be sharing this through our social media this week. So you can go take a look at it. But Ben was pretty happy with the Dash 9. And we've heard some really great reports on the BC Rail and the Canadian National from our friends up north. So we're more than happy to help you guys out. And we really appreciate all your input and your thoughts about this locomotive. So yeah, like I said, check out Ben. He's got a really nice YouTube channel over there and a great layout. And I've got another one to share with you. Some of you may have been receiving your ready-to-roll SD40-2s. They are in stock. They should be in stock at your hobby shop if you pre-ordered. You probably already got yours, or the dealer has not called you just yet, but they are in stock. And Derek over at DG Model Works, he did a review, and he did something a little bit different this time. Derek is usually known for covering Norfolk Southern. This time he did a review on the Fast 40s. So it looks like, there we go. So there's his review. He's talking about, I've got it on mute so we're not talking over each other. But check out his channel as well. It's DG Model Works. And where he's done this review of these SD40-2s. These are part of the Ready to Roll line. And like I said, they just came into stock. Ronald's got his. Good to hear. So yeah, two great channels to check out when you get some time. Dive deeper into these guys' YouTube videos. They do a lot of hard work on these, and it shows. They do reviews, they do layout hints and techniques and things of that nature. So check them out. And we'll share some other YouTube channels here in the future as well. But I was really excited to see those two reviews that just popped up this week. One last thing I want to point out to everybody. Today is December 7th, of course, and I think it goes without saying for us in the States especially. It's always good to remember the importance of this date. And so I just want to put this up here for us to remember. It is definitely a day that will live in infamy, as I said. And, thank you to those. I know now it's very rare for anybody to have survived this long from that time period. But for those that may still be with us, thank you. And thank you for all the veterans out there. It definitely was a day that changed the course of American history. And we just want to take a moment to remember and reflect, and just give a moment of silence for the day that changed the course of the United States, if you will. All right, thank you for that. That's an important date for us, and we should never forget it. We should never forget that day. All right, at this point, I've got time for a couple of questions. I know we went a little bit long, but the ICC Cabooses, they are so full with features. They're such an exciting product. Here, I'll even show you a picture of it again, just because it is so cool. It's just a cool. Yeah. I don't know which one I should get. Maybe leave me a comment in the comment section which one you like the most. Okay, so I'm looking through here. There's some great. Terry, they're not really adjustable per se. They're just features that you can turn on or off. Now that might change, but from what development's told me so far, you can just go through your interface and turn those on and off individually. Chris, I see your comment about Christmas lights. You know what? There's a lot of manufacturers in the model railroad world that offer these incredibly small LED lights. I've actually got a beacon on one of my N-scale switchers. So, I mean, it can be done. You might want to consult your DCC expert, maybe your dealer, about doing that, but I think similar. Let's see, Kirk, that's a pretty good question. He's saying, I have the BN passenger scheme X Great Northern F9B. Any chance of doing it in GN someday? I believe we did a few years ago, although technically it was BN because it was a patched. I'd have to look in the archives and see. I want to say we did that. Will we do it again? Probably. I'm just going through the questions. So we get this question every week, and I want to put it out there because, you know, I don't want you guys to think, oh yeah, we announced an AC 4400 and that's the end of it. We are doing them. So Cole says, hey Jim, so how is the upcoming Genesis 2.0 HO AC 4400 CW? I'm so looking forward to seeing them. They're working on them. I can trust me. You haven't seen John in a while, which I know he's extremely swamped working on all this. And one of the things that it's kind of hard for us to express, but if you've seen the Dash 9s, if you've actually seen the different versions of the Dash 9s that we did, every single model of the AC 4400 that we plan on doing, they're going to be different. So one road is going to be different from another road. And just because it's a modern locomotive, at the face value, it may look generic, but when you start getting into the minutia of all the details of each, not only just each road, but sometimes road number. And that's probably one of the most demanding parts of the job and development, is seeing all those different details. And that's why I say when you order one of our locomotives, when you pre-order, it's really a pre-order for a custom locomotive. You know, in the past, we were used to just going to our favorite hobby shop and buying the blue box models, which were pretty generic. If you think about it, they were just in different colors. Now we live in a world where when you buy a Genesis Dash 9 specific, you know, let's say BNSF, it's going to be specific to BNSF as that unit number. And sometimes within a specific time. That's why you'll see on our sheets online, we'll say what year this locomotive's paint scheme was. So it takes a little bit. We're working on it. Let's see. Yep, that is true. When we released the Genesis GP18s, I picked up a couple, and each one is different. Even though they're all BN, each one is different. SP, that's an interesting question. He's asking, will you be doing the SD40-2s in the new Wisconsin and Southern paint scheme? I wouldn't doubt it. I don't have any firm connection to that answer, but I would not doubt it. Let's see yes, thank you. Veranda turbine update. Let me check real quick. Now, anytime you want to know if something's available or not, or when it's going to be available, we try to update these as best we can. But it'll give you a rough. Let's see. Those should be coming in about, I would think, about December or so. If you go to our website and look it up by, in this case, it'll be Genesis diesel. You can look those up under the actual header, and they'll give you a rough estimate as to when those are due in stock. It's not always down to the exact date, but it's pretty close. We try to update that as we get information from our shippers. All right, I've got time for one more question. Let's see. Got some comments there. Well, we might not have any more questions. Looks like we've got everything covered. I'm looking back because I hate it when I end the show and I miss a question, and I know that's frustrating for you guys. Yes. Yes. That was part of the release with some lines that I'm interested in, so I've been watching those as well. So Glenn, don't worry. And I'll probably have to buy some of those too, because there's a connection there. All right, so everybody, thanks for coming on board and joining me today on Train Tuesday. Like I said, if you got any questions on anything that you saw today, you can always go to our website, athearn.com. And if you're not part of the newsletter, go ahead and sign up. You can go sign up, and every month we send out the new pre-order items. We also send out news, surveys, things of that nature. You can also find us on Facebook and pretty soon TikTok, believe it or not. And then you can also find us over at YouTube. Go over to our YouTube channel, like, subscribe, hit the bell icon for notifications. And until next time, I want everybody out there to be happy, be healthy, be safe, do some good modeling. And above all, high greens, everybody. Take care. Have a great week.